So, good afternoon everyone, I'm your host Poppy Roberton, and today we will be interviewing my grandfather Bruce Roberton. We will be getting to listen to his own personal account of working in the pub scene and how pub culture has evolved throughout the 50s to the 90s. So, Oompa, my first question will be, where were you and how old were you when you entered hospitality?
I was 18 and living in Marrickville,
Yeah.
Sydney.
Yes, okay. What initially attracted you to work in hospitality long term?
I didn't have the education that a lot of other people had, and I liked to mix with people back in those days.
Okay. In your first few years of working in pubs, were there any topics that seemed to be very popular among customers?
Football,
Yeah.
cricket in the summer,
Yes.
and tennis, mostly sport. Oh, and racing. Racing was a big thing, horse racing.
Is there any specific stories that you can remember?
What, from horse racing?
Yeah.
I went to a private race meeting on a big property out of Goulburn called Bell Trees, and you could only go there by invitation. And the owner of it was a Mr. Bell, and as a race, he told me this horse should win if it got around the corner of the straight. And I put some money on it, and then come to the top of the straight, it ran off the track, and I tore up the ticket. And then it come back on the track and it still won.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
What year was that?
54.
Yeah?
And anyhow, I went to the bookmaker who I knew, and I tore up the ticket. He said, "Well, you've lost your money." And then in the hotel where I was working, he came in that night and paid me.
He paid you?
Yeah, he paid me the money. He just had a joke with me.
Oh,
He
yeah.
wouldn't pay me at the race course.
Another question I have is, on your first few years of working in pubs, were there any characters that you remember?
Oh, there was always characters. There was a chap at Burwood was called Harry the Hat,
Harry the Hat?
and he'd never go anywhere without his hat. And anyone touched him, he'd punch him.
Really?
He'd be in the before. He was so obsessed with his hat. I can remember Harry the Hat.
What hats did he wear?
Oh, all different ones.
Oh, really?
And he was a single man. He wasn't married or anything like that, so he had to look after himself and look after his hats.
Okay. My next question would be, what time holds most significance to you when you were working?
I think when I was in Goulburn, after the West Indies cricket team had a draw in a test match in Brisbane, I think it was Brisbane, yeah, and they would have had their next match in Canberra, and Canberra said, "Oh no, we don't want them," and after the draw they become very popular, and I got them to come to Goulburn instead of going to Canberra. And they did that, and Canberra wanted them then, and I said, no, you said you didn't want them, so you're not getting them. So we had them in Goulburn, and they were famous, cricketers.
Yeah.
And it was great. We had them there for 3 nights, I think.
What year was that in?
1953. I think. I'm not 100% sure now, but I think it was 53.
Was there anything else happening around that time?
Yes. We had 2 champion tennis players, Lou Hode, who won Wimbledon and a couple of Australian Opens, and Ken Rosewell, who won a lot of tournaments overseas and in Australia. They came and gave some tennis lessons to the local people over a couple of days, and they stayed in the hotel for 2 nights.
What hotel was that?
The Grand Hotel in Goulburn.
Goulburn Grand Hotel. Okay. When do you believe the industry was at its peak and its lowest point?
Well, it's probably at its peak now, only because of poker machines, which I don't agree with, but anyhow. But today they're making more profits than anything, but they're not worried about beer or anything. They're only worried about people coming in and playing poker machines.
Do you think that affects us a lot?
Of course, it affects the people that lose their money. Yeah. They go home, they've got children, they've got no money to buy food with and things like that.
So it's at its peak for the people?
Oh, no, that's for the owners of the hotel. But I don't think that, no, we had a lot of sporting teams that I always was involved with. And I know when we were at the Royal Chief at Burwood in Sydney, they'd had a team there that hadn't won a competition in about 25 years. They'd never won one, but they'd been in it for about 25 years. And the second year I was there, they won it for the only time. And they've never won one since.
Really?
So that was good.
Yeah. What were some acceptable behaviours in the early days of you working that are not acceptable now?
Fights, of course, but they still go on and to probably a lesser extent. People dropping their pants and showing off, things like that.
Really?
Well, back in those days, women didn't go in the public bar. There was all men.
Yeah.
And men would drop their pants when they had too much to drink, and you say you do that again, and you never come back, but they'd do it again.
Were there any fights that you remember?
Oh yes, we'd have when I was at Mount Pritchard, and I was there for 11 years. We'd have an average of fight a week.
Average of fight a week? Were there any really bad ones?
Not really. No, nowhere till we had to get an ambulance or anything like that. I had to get the police a few times.
Yeah, okay. Was there any point at time where legalisation changes happened that affected how everything went about in the pubs?
Well, the thing was that we used to, first of all, not before my time, hotels closed at 6 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And then they brought in 10 o'clock closing. But you had an hour from 6 to 7 where you had to close so people would go home and have their dinner.
Yeah.
And you'd have people hide in the toilet because they didn't want to go home, or they'd hide somewhere, and then you open up again at 7 o'clock and all of a sudden they'd come out of the toilet. And things like that could happen. What did you learn from working in pubs overseas? Oh, overseas? Well, they're different to Australia.
Yeah.
When I worked in London, it was in a bar that only had the house guests from upstairs. We never took people off the street.
Yeah.
You had to be there or a guest of the person who was there. And I found that so much different because everyone would have to sit down and no one could stand up.
Yeah.
And we served tea and coffee because a lot of people just came in for coffee. And while I was there, Harold Holt, the Prime Minister of Australia, came because his son was living in London.
What year?
I think that was about 58.
Yeah.
And I served Harold Holt, the Prime Minister, and his son.
Where was that?
When?
Where?
At the Cumberland Hotel in London.
London, okay. What's other big differences from overseas pubs to Australian pubs?
The people are different, completely different.
How so?
Well, the English, they don't mix like the Australians. They seem to keep together groups of their own. And they still drink as much as the Australians. And they tipped a lot
Yeah?
because that was a big thing in London. You had a tip or you wouldn't get service. I went to barbers while I was there. When I'd only been in London about a couple of weeks, I think, and I went to barbers in London, and then they said there's I think it was £3 or something, because they didn't have dollars, £8. £3 for a haircut. So I gave him £3. He said, the barber said to me, where do you come from? I said, Australia. He said, they got slave labour there. I said, why? What are you talking about? He said, well, you didn't tip me. And so that's one thing I can remember about
Did
the
you learn a
difference.
lesson?
No, I didn't know.
Another question is, I think, what do you think the world would look like without pubs?
Well, you'd have bars. We've still got bars. In fact, there's as many bars as there is pubs around now. And of course, we've got the club situation. So I don't think it'll make all that much difference.
No.
But Australia is traditionally a pub.
Yeah.
Pub culture.
Yes.
So
If you could go back and do your time again, would you have chosen the career pathway you took?
yeah, I think I would. I enjoyed it,
Yep.
and I was quite successful.
Yes.
So no, I'd do it again.
Well, thank you for
Oh.
sharing all that with me today. Before we end the interview, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't think. I think you did a good job, Bobby.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, that's all my questions. So,
All right.